You've seen the tents, you've seen the tarps, you've walked past them 100 times without really looking, and that's fine, most people do. But there's one structure sitting under the Burnside overpass in Portland, Oregon, that has been there through 6 winters, through ice storms that collapsed every single tent around it, through nights that dropped to 9 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is still standing. It is not a tent, it is not a tarp stretched between shopping carts. It is a double-walled pallet shelter, and the guy who built it figured it out when he was 19 years old, with no tools, no money, and no one to ask. His name is Calder Mays. He's 25 now. He has these pale gray eyes that look almost silver in certain light, and he keeps his hair shaved close on the sides but leaves the top long enough to fall forward. It's a dark auburn, almost brown until the sun catches it, then it goes red. He's not a big person, maybe 5'9", but his hands are wrecked in the way that outdoor hands get wrecked. Cracked knuckles, thick calluses at the base of every finger, a scar across his left palm from a pallet nail that caught him wrong in year 2. He talks quietly. He does not tell this story with any drama, because to him there is no drama in it. It is just the thing he figured out because he had to. This is what he built, and more importantly, this is how he built it. The first winter almost killed him. That's not an exaggeration. He'll tell you that himself, in that flat no-fuss way he has. He was 19, he'd been sleeping under the Morrison Bridge for about 3 weeks, and he had a single-layer tent that someone had left behind near a donation bin on Burnside. It was a decent tent, an actual camping tent, not a tarp situation. He thought he was set. The first real cold snap came in mid-December. The temperature dropped to 14 degrees overnight. He woke up at 3 a.m., so cold he couldn't feel his feet, and when he tried to sit up inside the tent, the condensation from his own breath had frozen on the interior wall and was now radiating cold back at him from 3 inches away. He was shivering so hard he couldn't work the zipper. He got out eventually, and he walked for 2 hours in the dark to stay warm enough to function. That night is what started everything. Not because he had some sudden plan, but because he spent those 2 hours walking and thinking about the one thing that had gone wrong. It wasn't that he didn't have a sleeping bag. He had one. It wasn't that he was underdressed. He was layered up. The problem was the wall. The tent wall was 1 millimeter of nylon sitting right against winter air, and everything he generated in that tent, every bit of warmth his body put out, went straight through that wall and was gone. He knew, from nothing more than common sense, that the fix had to be air. Dead air. Something between him and the outside. But he had no money, and he had no materials, and he had no tools. He had a tent, a sleeping bag, and the night. The pallets were the answer, but he didn't know it yet. What he knew first was that the area around the Burnside overpass had a loading dock behind a restaurant supply warehouse, 2 blocks east, and that warehouse set pallets out in stacks of 8 to 12 every Tuesday and Thursday morning for pickup. Most of the time, the pickup truck didn't get all of them. The extras sat there until the following collection day. Calder spent 3 days just watching. He wanted to know which pallets got left, how long they sat, and whether anyone cared if one walked away. Nobody cared. The warehouse foreman, a guy named Denny Ruiz who wore the same green Carhartt vest every single day, told him flat out on the 4th day that the broken ones were free. "Anything that won't stack clean, it's yours," Denny said. "We can't ship on those." That's the detail that most people miss when they think about building with pallets. The broken ones are the ones with character. A pallet that won't stack clean has usually blown out one of its central stringers, the thick boards that run lengthwise between the top and bottom decks. When the central stringer goes, the pallet gets flexible in a way that's useless for freight but perfect for construction, because you can work it into angles, into corners, into places a rigid pallet won't go. Calder didn't know any of this on day 1. He learned it by accident over the first 2 weeks, and then he used it on purpose for the next 6 years. The thing about a single pallet wall is that it doesn't work. Calder learned that in winter, too, before he had the second layer. A single pallet is a wooden frame with gaps. The The top deck boards are separated by spaces, the bottom deck is the same, and the stringers in between don't touch each other along their full length. There is air moving through a single pallet wall constantly. It's not insulation, it's just wood in the way of wind, which helps, but not enough when the temperature goes to the single digits. The double wall is a different thing entirely. The way Calder built it, 2 rows of pallets standing upright facing each other, with a gap of roughly 8 to 10 inches between the outer face and the inner face. That gap is not empty. He filled it. Over the years, he filled it with different things depending on what he had. Cardboard first, then bubble wrap salvaged from a shipping company dumpster on SE Industrial, then eventually strips of moving blanket material that a furniture store on Powell Boulevard throws out after a delivery season ends. The material doesn't matter as much as the principle. That gap between the 2 walls has to trap air and hold it still, and anything that breaks up airflow inside that gap and gives the air something to sit against does the job. The double wall at the Burnside structure now runs along 3 sides. The 4th side is the underpass support column itself, a concrete pillar about 18 inches wide that Calder used as a corner anchor. He lashed the first pallet of each double wall section directly to that column using strapping tape, the heavy-duty kind, reinforced with fibers that gets used to band freight pallets together. He found 2 full rolls of it in the same warehouse dumpster where he found the bubble wrap. The roof is not pallets. He tried a pallet roof in year 3 and it failed, not structurally, but in terms of weight management when rain pools. A flat roof made of pallets with cardboard fill gets waterlogged after about 40 minutes of solid rain, and the weight change causes the whole structure to shift. What he uses now is a layered system, a piece of corrugated fiberglass roofing panel, the translucent kind you see on carport overhangs, that he found behind a building supply store on North Columbia, laid at a 4-degree pitch so water runs off the back edge, then a layer of heavy contractor plastic over that. Then sandbags made from old grain bags filled with gravel at the 2 low corners to keep the plastic from lifting in wind. The whole roof assembly weighs about 60 pounds and has not moved significantly in 3 winters. People who haven't lived outside don't have a good map for what cold does to a structure overnight, and that's not their fault. They live inside, and inside, the walls are handling it for them. What Calder describes is simpler to understand if you think about what a wall actually does. A wall keeps 2 temperatures apart, the temperature on the outside and the temperature on the inside. How well it does that job is a function of how many times it can slow that heat transfer down. 1 layer of nylon slows it once. 1 layer of wood slows it once. 2 layers of wood with a gap between them slow it 3 times, outer wood, air gap, inner wood. The more times you slow it, the longer the heat you generate stays on your side of the wall. Calder did not learn this from anyone. There was no one around who knew it. The shelters and services available to someone in his situation in Portland are not structured around construction knowledge. They're structured around intake, around beds, around services. If you are 19 years old and sleeping outside and you want to learn how to build a thermally efficient double-walled structure from reclaimed industrial wood, the system does not have a program for that. The information exists. Obviously, it's in building science textbooks, in passive house design manuals, but those are not things that circulate in the spaces Calder was moving through. He got there by thinking it through, wall by wall, winter by winter. The first version of the structure went up in year 2. 3 sides, single wall, corrugated plastic roof. He stayed warmer. Not warm, warmer. He could sleep through the night without the 3 a.m. crisis, but he was still losing too much through that 1 layer, still leaning on the sleeping bag to do work a wall should be doing. The second wall came in year 3, and to add it, he had to pull the whole structure apart and rebuild from the anchor pallets out. 4 days in October. When that first double-wall winter came, he woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't figure out what had changed. He told me he sat up in the dark for a minute, completely disoriented, before he figured out he was sweating. First time in 3 years he'd been too warm at night. He genuinely thought something was wrong. The gap fill has been the ongoing experiment. Cardboard first, because cardboard was everywhere. Then bubble wrap when he found a dumpster full of it. That lasted one season before it compressed flat and stopped doing anything. The moving blanket strips are what he uses now. They compress too, but slowly enough that one restuffing per October keeps the gap effective. He calls it winterizing. Same concept as sealing windows or blowing attic insulation, just with different materials and no ladder. Year 5. The roof rebuild. The corrugated fiberglass panel. The contractor plastic, the gravel bags. He also added a door at this point, not a hinged door, but a double flap system made from 2 pieces of moving blanket material attached at the top of the entry opening, overlapping in the center, weighted at the bottom with loops of paracord threaded through small gravel-filled bags. You push through both flaps to enter. They fall back into place immediately. There is no gap at the sides. He figured this out after noticing that every time he entered or exited, he lost about 10 minutes of interior heat through the opening. Year 6, this past winter, the structure held through a week of temperatures that stayed below 20 degrees, including 2 nights that touched 9 degrees. The tents within 50 feet of the structure all failed in that stretch. 3 people ended up sheltering inside Calder's structure with him during the worst night. They fit. Barely, but they fit. The interior, which is roughly 6 feet wide by 8 feet deep, by 5.5 feet high at the center point, held 4 adults without the temperature dropping below what Calder estimates was the mid-40s. The human bodies helped. 4 people generate more heat than 1. But the walls held it. There are things this structure does not do, and Calder is clear about them. It does not move. That's the trade. A tent you can break down in 20 minutes and be somewhere else. Calder's structure took 4 days to build in its current form. And if the city comes through and clears the encampment, which has happened twice in the time he's been there, though both times his spot under the overpass was not included in the cleared zone, he loses the structure, he can't take it with him. He has spare pallets stacked near the warehouse, and he has Denny's standing offer of the broken ones. But he'd be starting over. That is a real cost, and he does not pretend otherwise. It also does not solve water. He hauls water. He has a 6-gallon container he fills every 2 days at a service access point near the Blanchett House on NW Glisson. That is not a structural problem he can build his way out of. And it does not disappear. A pallet structure under an overpass is visible. It is obvious. Calder has navigated 6 years of that visibility, has had conversations with city workers, with outreach teams, with other people at the encampment, about who is there and how much space the structure takes. He is not invisible in his spot, and he is not pretending to be. The structure announced itself the moment he built it, and he's been managing that relationship ever since. What does a pallet actually cost? Nothing if you know where to look. And that's the thing that made this possible for Calder, and makes it impossible for most people in his situation to know about. It's not that the materials don't exist. It's that accessing them requires knowing which businesses discard which materials on which days, requires the time and mobility to check those spots regularly, requires a relationship, like the one Calder built with Denny Ruiz, at the warehouse where that Carhartt vest never changes. Most people moving through the shelter system don't have that time, don't have that relationship, don't have the fixed location that makes it worth investing in. Calder had one thing that allowed him to build all of this. He decided, at 19, that he was going to stay in one spot long enough to learn it. That's not a choice everyone can make. Some people can't stay. But it's the thing that made the difference for him. The strapping tape he found, the bubble wrap he found, the moving blanket material. He pays for that now actually. A furniture warehouse on Powell sells damaged moving blankets for $2 each. He buys 2 per year in September and strips them into sections to repack the wall gaps, $4 a year to winterize a structure that has held for 6 winters. The corrugated fiberglass roof panel was one he found, but they sell for about $20 at building surplus stores if you need to source one. The contractor plastic runs $3 for a 6-foot section. The paracord he uses throughout the structure, for lashing, for the door weights, for tie-downs on the roof. He buys in 30-foot lengths for about $4 each, and he goes through maybe 2 per year. The tools? None. He has a pry bar he found, and he uses it to adjust pallet boards when he needs to. Everything else in the structure is lashed or wedged or balanced. 6 winters, roughly $11 a year in materials he actually purchases. Everything else was there, sitting behind warehouses and in dumpsters waiting for someone who knew what they were looking for. The structure is not beautiful. Calder does not care about beautiful. What it is solid. You can push on the outer wall and feel nothing give, because the 2 layers and the gap material between them act as a single mass. The outer pallets are lashed together at their corners with paracord in a figure 8 pattern that distributes force across both the horizontal and vertical joints. The inner pallets are lashed the same way, tied to the outer layer at the top rail through the gap with short lengths of cord to keep the spacing consistent. The whole thing behaves more like one object than like a collection of separate pieces. In the morning, in winter, when it's cold enough that your breath fogs inside a normal tent, Calder's interior stays clear. The air inside the structure doesn't drop far enough to make fog. That's the test he uses. If he can breathe without seeing it, the walls are working. He's had people ask him how he learned all of this. The honest answer is that he didn't learn it from anywhere specific. He learned it from being wrong. The first version of the structure was wrong. The single wall was wrong in a way that taught him why it was wrong, which meant he knew exactly what the second wall needed to do. The cardboard fill was wrong in a particular way. It got wet and lost all its value. That taught him what dry, compressible fill actually needed to resist.